Hey guys, welcome back. So in today's video, we're going to be diving into the world of inspiring effects for our keyboards and synthesizers. Let's dive into it. So what's up, Chris here. In today's video, I'm going to be showing off a variety of different effects that we can use to really hype up our keyboard sounds. Bear in mind, we're going to start from some pretty basic effects and we're going to work our way up to some more advanced style effects. So if you already know some of the technical stuff, the reverbs and delays and whatnot, feel free to use the chapter markers below to skip ahead. I'm sure there'll be something you might learn from this video. And with that said, let's dive into it. So to start this off, you know what I'm saying? Okay, so get the keyboard out. So I'm going to start with some basic sounds. I've got a Wurlitzer, a Rhodes and a piano. Pretty familiar electric keyboard sounds. We've also got a synthesizer. We're going to get to that a bit later. But I'm going to start off with the Rhodes. This is the dry Rhodes sound. So that's our dry Rhodes sound. From the get-go, you can tell that sound is pretty mono. There's a lot of information in the middle and not too much on the sides. That would be because keyboards like the Rhodes and the Wurlitzer were primarily mono keyboards. So keys players or producers might use a combination of different effects to help make those sounds a bit more stereo, a bit more pleasant for both your ears. The first effect that can add a little bit of space, literally, to your sound is reverb. So this is our dry sound. I'm going to add a bit of reverb. And now we've got a nice bit of space that this lives in. So if I play the same thing, now it's sounding a lot more lush and actually giving a bit of depth to our Rhodes sound. So on top of that, I can use a bit of delay to almost add a similar effect, but this time with a bit of motion, a bit of groove. And you'll see what I mean. So I've got here just set up these two sends that you can see here. I've got a reverb on one and a delay on the other. Just a standard quarter note delay. It's ping pong though, so it's going to be bouncing left to right. And with a combination of the two, we have something like this. So now we're really starting to build up a bit of that space, adding a little bit of dimension to our sound and almost making it a bit otherworldly. You know, it's starting to add a bit of this mysterious vibe to it. Really nice. Just a little extra feature. I'm sending that delay here back into the reverb. So instead of having this dry delay play after it like this, now I'm going to remove the reverb on the actual keyboard, but I'll turn back on the reverb send, and now you can hear the delay has a bit of reverb on it. And that again is just adding to the depth of the effect we're using. Really nice. So it all kind of sits in this beautiful lush space. So next, moving on to our Wurlitzer sound. This is what it sounds like when it's dry. It's nice, it's warm, it's got a lovely sound, as a Wurlitzer tends to have. So what I'm going to use to spice this up, as opposed to the reverb and delay, is some modulation. Modulation comes in a few different flavors, you could say. If I open up, I'm using Keyscape right now for this. It has its own effects section, as most of these keyboard plugins do. And again, it's offering us some reverb and some modulation. The modulation being chorus, phaser, univibe, and vibrato. And lest we forget, there's also tremolo with some auto pan. Now, auto pan is a very early form of effect that people would use to make their electric keyboards a bit more stereo. I'm just going to demonstrate that right now. So this is our mono Wurlitzer. Now I'm going to turn on the tremolo. You can hear a bit of it there. I'm going to crank it up. And that's just modulating the volume. But if I turn on auto pan, you'll start to hear. Now it's bouncing between the left and right headphones, speakers, or however you're listening to this. If I slow that down a bit, be a bit more apparent. And like that, we're adding a little bit more stereo interest. I'm going to dial back the depth just to make it a bit more subtle. Really nice. But if I go over to the effects section, we can use a bit of these different types of modulations we've got. I'm actually going to turn off the tremolo for now just to avoid confusing any of the viewers, but I'm going to turn on this chorus. Right now it's on mono mode. I'll flick it onto stereo in a bit, but this is what it sounds like. Right, adding a little bit of that nice chorusy effect, but if I turn off the mono mode, now we've got this. Really lush, adding a little bit more stereo interest. Again, we can go further with this. There's a couple different types of chorus. Just some different flavors of kind of the same effect, but we can obviously go a bit crazier with the amount or the rate. Or I can crank that rate. And you can really hear the pitch variations. Starting to get closer to a univibe effect. We can show you what that's like. Or we have things like the phaser, again a different kind of modulation effect. Really lush, so we can use a combination of these modulation effects. We can add a little bit of reverb in there, and then all of a sudden you're sitting in a very familiar kind of nostalgic keyboard sounding world. Okay, so those are our basic keyboard effects out the way. Let's now move on to something a little bit more advanced. So, where we're going to start? I'd like to start with something called Granular Effects. So there's a couple of plugins I have access to here. One is Arturia's EFX Fragments and the other one is Portal by Output. Both do similar things but in their own unique way. So I'm going to start with Fragments because I really dig the sound. So I'm going to go back to the Rhodes for this. Again, just to remind us, this is what it sounds like dry. And now let's turn on Fragments. So already we're starting to step it up on the type of effects we've got access to. These plugins are doing something quite unique, which is basically getting the samples that go through it or the sounds that are being played through it, slicing them up into little fragments, into little grains, and playing them back either at different speeds, different pitches, stretching them, squeezing them, all these different combinations of sounds, and also adding a couple of effects in between all of that. Fragments in this case has a little bit of pan automation going on. It does have access to this filter that's opening and closing, as well as a reverb that's adding a little bit of space to our sound. So if I open up the advanced section, you can see there's a lot more control going on behind the scenes in terms of the grain direction and the shape and all of this randomness that's added. So overall, personally, when it comes to these kind of effects, I prefer flicking through presets because I would rather just find a sound that I find quite inspiring as opposed to kind of being a bit finicky with it. But it is good to like experiment. So it really depends on what kind of person you are in the sense of how deep you want to get into this. But yeah, like I said, I like to just find a nice preset and experiment with that. So moving on, the next plugin I would use that's a similar kind of vibe but different is Portal. You can tell has some similar controls with the speed and stretch, the LFOs. In this case, it kind of uses this XY mapping controller to modulate different parts of the plugin. I'm just going to quickly play and show you what this sounds like. There you go, you can hear a lot of craziness going on. In this case, I've got the plugin on full wet, hence why if you saw my playing was a little bit delayed with the sound actually coming out. If I pull that back, you can hear a bit of the granular goodness that's going on behind the scenes. A really lovely effect if you want to try get some really fascinating, unique sounds out of something that's maybe a bit familiar. I tend to put this effect on things like piano and guitar. I always get a really unique sound or effect from these kind of plugins. And speaking of which, on the piano, that is our next sound to demonstrate some effects. This is our dry piano sound. And so the next effect I'm going to show off is Shimmer. Now, Shimmer can be presented in a couple different ways, but it's normally a pitched either delay or reverb. In this case, I'm going to show it off as a delay with a plugin called Crystallizer by Soundtoys. The beauty of this plugin is it's quite a weird delay in the first place because you have access to reversing the actual sounds. What's fascinating is you can pick the pitch and it works in cents. So if it's on 0, there's no pitching, but you can hear that weird delay going on. If I push this to 1200, it puts it up an octave. And if I double that, same thing. Right? So I'm going to keep this on 1200 for the time being and just demonstrate what this sounds like. Really nice. It's almost got a bit of a sense of that granular sound, but with its own taste. I would usually put something like a reverb after this to pretty much just soften a lot of the sound and make it a lot less kind of all over the place, sporadic kind of thing. There you go, Crystallizer, a great shimmer effect. Ableton actually has its own shimmer effect if you go into the hybrid reverb. I'll turn off Crystallizer as well. This is a combination of a convolution and an algorithmic reverb. For the time being, I'm going to stick it on 100% of the algorithmic reverb, change this dark hole to shimmer, and then you see here we've got access to the pitch. And so this is what it sounds like with the reverb an octave up. So there you go, similar to the Crystallizer, but a lot more softened and blurred. A really lovely effect, especially on pianos, I find. But now moving out of the shimmer world, we're going to go on to the next and final effect. This is sequenced multi-effects. I have two plugins to show off. Both of them are quite unique. I'll leave it up to you to decide which one is maybe more for you. But I'm going to start off with this plugin called Shaperbox. This is a multi-sequenced effect that works off LFOs basically, but you can shape the LFOs. So in this case, these are all the effects you have access to. And if I open any one of them, I'll start with the volume. You can see what's going on here. It's basically modulating whatever the effect you have selected. In this case, I've got a volume module and it's affecting the volume in this specific shape. So I'm just going to quickly demonstrate what this whole preset sounds like so you get an idea of what it's doing. But as you can see here, the majority of the sound is coming from the volume automation, in this case, the volume LFO. It's giving us very much this trance gate effect where it's chopping up a lot of the sound. Next, we've got the filter module, which is slowly closing and opening up the filter. So the liquid module, which is basically a modulation effect, it's split up into a couple of bands here, which is the high band that has a flanger on a very slow rate. And then in the mid band, it's using a phaser that has a little quarter note style effect to kind of add. And then lastly, we've got our drive module, which does this accenting with a little bit of drive every couple of beats. One of my favorite things to use this plugin for is using this reverb module. And as you can hear, it's just adding reverb in this case. I'm actually going to turn down this drive for the time being. There we go. And what I'm going to use is a ramp. So you can hear the reverb kind of closes and opens. But what I like to do is set this on quarter notes. If I put the effect to fully wet so you can hear what's going on. So you start to get this pulsing kind of effect, but from a reverb going dry to wet. And I quite like it. It's a bit of a unique sound. And yeah, just a cool effect. I quite like that. Moving on to the next sequence effect, I've got Effectrix. Now this does a similar thing, but instead it works in blocks. And you go into your effect and you can pick what you want the effect to do in this case. And then you're basically turning it off and on in a sequence. So I'm just going to quickly demonstrate what this sounds like. Whole world of effects. But there you have it, guys. That's about it for today. If you enjoyed this video, please feel free to leave a comment in the comment section below letting us know what your favorite effect was, or if you have any effects that you really like to use to add to your keyboards or your synthesizers. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm going to end this video by using some of these effects on a synth just to top this video off. And once again, I've been Chris Vella, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye for now.